Let me tell you about a place that doesn't exist anymore. A city so bright, so perfect that people used to call it paradise. Every street gleamed white. Every wall shone under the sun. It looked like a dream, and for a time the people believed it was. That city was called Flevance. From the outside, Flevance was a jewel of the world. Merchants rushed there to trade, kings envied its beauty, nobles craved its treasures. Why? Because of one thing, a shining stone called amber lead. It was rare, it was beautiful, it was valuable beyond imagination. With it, they made jewelry, weapons, ornaments, even the very houses of the city sparkled with it. The people of Flevance thought themselves lucky, chosen, blessed, but they were wrong. Amber lead was a curse. It did not kill quickly. No, it was far more cruel than that. It crept into the blood, into the bones, until sickness grew like roots inside the body. A person might smile one day and cough blood the next. A child might laugh and play in the morning, only to waste away in bed years later. And worst of all, it was inherited, passed from parent to child, a legacy of poison. By the time the people of Flevance realized what was happening, it was too late. The world already knew. The world government, the neighboring nations, they had always known. They did not warn the city. They did not help. Instead, they condemned it. You see, when people are afraid, they do not ask questions. They do not care about truth. They only want the threat gone. And so the soldiers came. They came with fire. They came with bullets. They came with orders to wipe Flevance off the face of the earth. And so the White City, once called paradise, turned to ash. Families were slaughtered in their homes, children cut down in the streets. Those who begged for mercy found none. The air was filled with fire, with blood, with screams that echoed until no voice was left. Flevance died in a single night. But one boy survived. 10 years old, his name was Trafalgar Law. He saw his family fall. His mother, his father, his little sister gone one by one before his eyes. He should have died with them, but he didn't. He hid. Beneath the corpses of those he loved, he held his breath, trembling in the darkness until silence fell over the city. When the fires burned out and the soldiers left, the boy crawled free from the pile of the dead. Alive, yes, but cursed. For the poison of amber lead was already inside him. His bones carried death. His blood ticked like a clock, counting down the years he had left. Imagine that. A child alone, no family, no home, a sickness that would kill him slowly. And yet in his eyes there was no surrender, there was rage, there was defiance. That night a vow was born. Trafalgar Law would not die quietly. He would not fade away like the rest of his people. He would live. And in living, he would tear the world apart if he had to. And that, my friend, is where his story begins. Not in joy, not in peace, but in fire, in blood, and in ruin. The White City is gone, forgotten by history, but its last son still walks this world, and the mark he will leave will not be forgotten. After the fall of Flevance, the boy wandered. Imagine him, just 10 years old, with no family, no home, and poison eating away at his bones. He carried nothing but a small satchel and hatred heavy enough to drown a grown man. Everywhere he went, doors slammed shut. People whispered disease and contagion. They drove him away with stones, with fire, with fear in their eyes. So the boy kept walking, walking into darkness, walking into violence, walking toward death. And where do you think a child with no future ends up? With pirates, with killers, with men whose hearts were as rotten as the world that betrayed him. That was how Trafalgar Law fell in with the crew of a monster, Don Quixote Dough Flamingo. Dough Flamingo was no ordinary pirate. To the world, he was a noble fallen from grace, a broker of death, a man whose laugh could make even the brave shiver. To the boy, he was opportunity. If Law was going to die anyway, why not burn the world before his clock ran out? And so the cursed child became a soldier in Dough Flamingo army. He killed without hesitation. He trained his body, sharpened his will, hardened his heart. Law was not a boy anymore. He was a blade waiting to cut. But fate is cruel, yes, but sometimes it is strange. Sometimes in the deepest pit of darkness it drops a spark of light. That spark was Rosinante, Dough Flamingo younger brother, a tall, clumsy man in a feathered coat who stumbled over his own feet and seemed incapable of speech. To most of the crew, he was a fool, a harmless clown tolerated only because of his bloodline. But Law discovered the truth. Rosinante could speak, he could think, and most importantly, he was not the fool he pretended to be. He was a marine in disguise, a spy in the heart of the Don Quixote family. At first, Rosinante wanted nothing to do with Law. He even threw the boy out of a window once. But when he learned Law's name, everything changed. Trafalgar D. Law. That hidden middle name, the D, struck him like thunder. For Rosinante knew that the bearers of the will of D carried a destiny that terrified the world government itself. And here was a dying boy, carrying that name, poisoned and furious, marching toward an early grave. Rosinante could not ignore him. He saw himself in the boy. He saw the shadow of his own tragedy. And slowly, clumsily, with gentle hands hidden beneath the mask of a fool, he reached out. For the first time since Flevance burned, someone treated Law not as a weapon, not as a disease, but as a child. And the boy, though he would never admit it, began to feel something he thought he had lost forever: hope. But hope alone cannot cure poison. Amber lead still ate away at Law's life. His clock still ticked. Rosinante searched desperately for a way to save him. He begged doctors. He chased rumors. He crossed seas. And finally, he heard whispers of a miracle. A devil fruit, the Opi Opi no Mi. A fruit said to grant its eater the powers of a surgeon. A fruit that could cut, heal, and even give eternal life at the cost of the user's own. And most importantly, a fruit that could purge poison. If Rosinante could steal this fruit, he could save Law. But stealing from the underworld was no simple task, and keeping it hidden from Dough Flamingo was suicide. Rosinante knew this. He knew what would happen if he failed, but still he tried. Because to him, saving this boy was worth more than his own life. And so the stage was set. A dying child. A clumsy fool who was not a fool at all. And a devil fruit that could rewrite fate itself. The storm was coming. And when it broke, blood would fall, and only one of them would walk away alive. After the storm, after the fire, after the betrayal of the world itself, the boy emerged. But he was no longer the same child who had crawled from the ruins of Flevance. The poison that had nearly claimed his life had been purged, thanks to the sacrifice of Rosinante, the clumsy man who was more than he seemed. Law had survived, he had been saved, but the world he returned to had not changed. The seas were cruel, pirates ruled with iron fists, nations took what they wanted and left destruction in their wake, and somewhere out there, Dough Flamingo, the man who had taken everything from Law and orchestrated so much pain, still lived. But the boy no longer walked blindly into death. Now he had purpose. Now he had power. He founded the Heart Pirates, a crew not of soldiers or killers but of survivors. Outcasts, wanderers, those who had been cast aside by a world that feared them. On the deck of their ship, the Polar Tang, Law became both captain and doctor, surgeon of death, keeper of life. Every member of his crew looked to him, not just for leadership, but for the promise that no matter how dark the world became, there would always be someone to fight for them. Law's reputation began to grow. Across the seas, whispers of a young pirate with the power to cut through anything, heal the dying, and manipulate life itself spread like wildfire. He was intelligent, strategic, and utterly ruthless when provoked. A boy once cursed with a few years to live now walked with the audacity of a man who could defy death itself. The world began to take notice. Law became one of the worst generation, a group of pirates young enough to be reckless, powerful enough to be dangerous, and ambitious enough to change the balance of power in the seas. He was not yet a legend, but the foundations were laid. It was during this time that the seas themselves began to test him. The Sabyati archipelago, a place where pirates gathered and rivalries flared, became his first stage. Law moved like a shadow through chaos, striking swiftly, calculating each step. He did not seek glory, he sought survival and the accumulation of knowledge that would one day bring him vengeance. Then came the Marineford War, a battle that would shake the world. Pirates and Marines clashed and the oceans ran red with blood. Law appeared amidst the chaos, not as a soldier but as a savior for those he deemed worthy. He rescued Luffy, a young man with a heart as fiery as his own, and Jin, a warrior of honor and courage. In that moment the world began to understand that Law was not just another pirate. He was a force, a storm with purpose. As battles raged and kingdoms trembled, Law's name rose higher, a warning whispered in every port. Shichibukai, the title given to powerful pirates who played dangerous games with the world government, became his temporary cloak. Yet even under their watchful eyes, Law's true intentions remained hidden. He was building, planning, surviving, and waiting for the day he would confront Dough Flamingo. And through it all, the Heart Pirates remained at his side. Survivors, outcasts, and fighters, each one bound by the promise that their captain, this boy who had clawed his way from death, would not let them fall. From the ashes of Flevance to the blood-soaked decks of pirate ships, Law's journey continued. The cursed child had become a captain, the dying boy had become a man, and the world would never forget the name Trafalgar D. Water Law. The seas are vast, endless, dangerous. For most, they are simply a place to sail, to trade, to survive. But for Trafalgar Law, they were a chessboard. Every island, every port, every shadowed alley was a piece in a game only he could see. After the rise of the Heart Pirates, Law had grown stronger. He had honed his devil fruit powers, shaping life and death like a surgeon. But one thing haunted him still: Dough Flamingo. The man who had stolen everything from him, his family, his innocence, his chance at a normal life. The man who had killed Rosinante, the only person who had truly believed in him. The world had grown chaotic in the New World. Powerful pirates, tyrants, and emperors ruled islands with iron fists. Yet Law was patient. He did not strike blindly. He waited. He planned. He built alliances. And then he found one in the most unlikely of companions, a boy named Monkey D. Luffy. Luffy was reckless, loud, full of fire and hope and a strange kind of courage that could not be measured by strength alone. Law saw in him a tool, perhaps even a friend. For the first time in years, Law allowed himself to trust someone, but he never forgot his true goal. Their path led to Punk Hazard, an island of fire and ice, where alchemy and cruelty danced together. There, Law faced horrors that reminded him of Flevance. Children experimented upon, lives shattered, innocence destroyed. He moved swiftly, surgically, dismantling Caesar Clown's twisted schemes. Every move, every strike was calculated. Every action brought him closer to the day he would face Dough Flamingo. Then came Dressrosa, a kingdom under the shadow of a tyrant. Dough Flamingo ruled there like a god, weaving lies, fear, and death into every corner of the land. Law's past was no longer a whisper in the wind. It was a scream he had longed to release. The truth of his childhood, the loss of Flevance, and the death of Rosinante were revealed in that place. Every step he took, every plan he executed, was fueled by vengeance. He allied with Luffy, not just as a partner, but as a weapon against a man who had haunted his nightmares for years. The battle was brutal. Chaos reigned. Buildings fell, streets burned, and the cries of the oppressed echoed in every alleyway. Law fought with the precision of a surgeon and the rage of a boy who had lost everything. Every strike, every cut, every maneuver brought him closer to Dough Flamingo. And finally, in a moment drenched in fire and blood, the two faced each other. Law's eyes burned with a mixture of sorrow and fury. Dough Flamingo sneered, as he always did, confident in his cruelty. But he had underestimated the boy who had clawed his way from the ruins of a dead city, who had survived poison, death, and betrayal. The battle was not just physical. It was the culmination of years of grief, loss, and rage. Every attack carried the weight of Flevance. Every dodge echoed the screams of the past. And in the end, with the aid of his ally Luffy, Law's vengeance was realized. Dough Flamingo fell. The tyrant who had built empires from lies and blood was defeated. But even in victory, Law did not celebrate. For vengeance does not bring peace. It does not heal the scars etched deep into the soul. It only clears the path to the next challenge, the next storm, the next shadow. From the ashes of kingdoms to the hearts of allies, Law had proven himself not just a survivor, but a force of the new world. He had transformed from a cursed boy into a man who could confront monsters, both external and within. And yet, as he looked across the horizon, he knew the road was far from over. There were greater tyrants to face, deeper conspiracies to unravel, and the true power of the seas still waiting to test him. The boy who had once crawled from the ruins of Flevance now stood as a captain, a strategist, and a living legend. The world had learned his name, and the seas had learned to fear it. Trafalgar D. Water Law. The seas are never quiet. They churn, they rage, they swallow the weak and spit out the strong. And in the new world, power is measured not in wealth, but in blood, fear, and ambition. Trafalgar D. Water Law had survived much. He had clawed his way out of death itself, he had avenged his past, and he had earned the respect and fear of the world. But his journey was far from over. He sailed to Zoo, an island hidden atop the back of a massive elephant, where secrets whispered in the wind. There, Law's mind worked as sharply as his blade, mapping out the next strike against one of the four emperors, Kaido. He moved carefully, gathering allies, weighing every risk, always calculating, always planning. And it was during this time that Luffy returned to his side, the boy full of fire and unpredictable courage. Together, they forged an alliance of pirates, samurai, and warriors, all aiming to topple tyrants who had ruled with iron fists. Law did not need friendship, yet he found it not in loyalty, but in shared purpose. Then came Wano, a land of samurai, rebellion, and oppression. The country was suffocating under the yoke of Kaido and Orochi. Law's strategies unfolded like the precise cuts of a surgeon. Every move he made, every strike, every deception, carved the path toward liberation. But the true test awaited on Onigashima, the island fortress where emperors and monsters convened. Here, Law revealed the full extent of his devil fruit powers, powers that had evolved far beyond what anyone had imagined. In the heat of battle, he awakened the true potential of the Op no Mi. Kroom, a technique that allowed him to coat objects and manipulate them with surgical precision, turning the battlefield into his operating table. Shock Will, destructive waves released inside his targets, shattering flesh, bone, and steel alike. Puncture Will, piercing through even the most massive opponents, striking fear into those who believed themselves untouchable. On that battlefield, Law fought alongside Luffy and others, taking down foes who had once seemed immortal. Together with another rising pirate, Kid, they confronted Big Mom, one of the most feared emperors of the seas. The clash was cataclysmic, shaking islands, tearing the sea, and rewriting the balance of power. And in a feat few believed possible, Law and his allies emerged victorious. Even with triumph, Law remained cold, calculating. Victory was a step, not an end. The sea still hid countless dangers. One more emperor, one more conspiracy, one more shadow waiting to strike. And there was always the looming figure of Blackbeard, a threat whose ambitions could swallow worlds. But now, the world knew Law's name not as a mere survivor, but as a storm that could not be contained. A pirate whose skill, cunning, and will had turned death into his ally. A surgeon of death, shaping life and destruction with equal hands. From the ashes of Flevance to the battlefields of Wano, from the whispers of betrayal to the roar of empires falling, Trafalgar D. Water Law had become more than a man. He had become a legend. And yet, the story was far from over. For the seas are endless, the world is cruel, and as long as tyrants exist, the surgeon of death will sail, cutting a path where none dare follow. The boy who had once crawled from corpses now stood as a force the world could not ignore. The cursed child had become a captain, a strategist, a warrior, and his name would echo through history, Trafalgar D. Water Law.